Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki don tok say im government go continue to invest more on top technical and vocational education as dis one go help di growth and economic development for di state. Obaseki tok dis one for di courtesy visit wey members and representatives of di World Bank, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation come do on Monday for Government House, Benin City. Obaseki wey throway salute give di ogbonge partners for dia support on top reforms wey dey happen for education for di state. Come still tok say im government dey try sustain di achievement dem don record on top di education sector through di EdoBEST program.
I want to thank you, our partners, the World Bank, Gates Foundation, and UNICEF for taking time out, to pay us a visit and to spend time drilling down to understand what we have done, what we've achieved, and see what the areas you can help us improve. It's been a very significant 2 days. Because for some reason, you must come regularly because everybody, you seem to have been like a magnet that has just pulled all those resources. The Economist guy was in here today, IOF was in here yesterday. Just pulled in all those resources and helping us make sense of what the journey we started in 2016, 17. For us, it's been hands-on. It's about execution because we have a time frame. But just as we're executing and begin to, over time, we believe with time and proficiency, we'll smoothen out all the rough edges in areas of execution. I think for now, it's about a thought leadership. It's about strategy. How does it all tie together for us into the long term as a country? 3 areas we're still struggling with that we'll need some help and thinking through. The 300 or so thousand children we're talking to are children in our public school system. They're only about 60% of the kids of that age in our population. Yes, the great thing is that yes, there's children from disadvantaged backgrounds who can't afford to send the children to private schools, so we open standards. But how do we then keep our eyes on what's going on in the private schools for children of that age? It's one issue that we need to think through and see how. How do we extend some of the state subsidies to help those schools so that we can peer into what's happening, how these children are being taught and what they are being taught? The second issue for us is, how do we realign policy, education policy in the country? Because of our political history, we've gone through many start and stops and many policy somersaults, particularly in education. Through independence up till the early or mid-80s, we had a British system we inherited from Britain, where you had a basic school, the primary school, and the secondary school system. And then, it started a 6-5, or it was a 6-8-4 system. It became a 6-5-4 system, right? And to the military now changing that about 25 years ago, but a generation ago, into a 6-3-3-4 system, where basic education was considered as the first 9 years of learning, rather than 6. Okay? However, whereas we created this policy, we never disarticulated, in terms of infrastructure and some clarity, the difference between, what we did was bifurcated secondary education, right, into junior and senior. Whereas that was done in terms of policy, it was never followed through. So we never had, we had a situation where, in terms of governance, right, the junior school, the P1 to P9 was supposed to be governed by one body and a set of laws. The P10 to P12 was supposed to be in another world of its own, and it's only now the federal government just created some governance and legal structure around it. So from a policy standpoint, there's a lot of confusion at the national level. We were trying to realign. So from the studies, you can see what we've done over the last 5 years with kids from P1 to P6. Now they are moving on to, junior school. How do we ensure that we don't drop the standards for them? How do we ensure that by the time they are finishing the 9 years of basic education, they have a pathway to what they want to be in life? So yes, we're trying to emphasize TVETs. From the P9, you're saying, okay, you can either go TVET, the TVET route, or you could go the, your normal secondary school route. And so how do we begin to make those investments? How do we begin to train the teachers? Because yes, you see the struggle we're going through with the 13,000, 15,000 teachers at the P1 to P6 level. So how do we begin to think through today and because these are teachers that will teach in specialized subjects, not the kind of teachers at that basic level. So these are some of the policy challenges that we need to begin to put our hands around. The good thing is that we were living in 2 years, but we were living a 30-year plan for the state. And so we want to use the benefit of the relationship with you, the resources you have, to see how we can help, get through these challenges.
Jamie Savedre will be the Global Director of World Bank. Go through salutes give the Obaseki government for the ogbonge work they don't do on top education for the state. E con still tok say the visit wey dem con do so na to know the progress and challenges they don dey make for education and how dem fit help sustain am.
I really want to commend you and your team in particular to be very realistic in the sense that usually it is like, okay, so we're doing great and we've improved this, we improved that, right? But it is very, very good to see, look, we have a great teacher, we have an okay teacher, and we have a teacher that needs much more support, right? That's usually the reality everywhere. But you don't usually see that recognition that, okay, some things are going well, other things need to improve, right? And my sense is that's part of the genuine political will to try to improve things of a system that is very complex, right? And it's complicated to move. So I think that's very important. So I think we have identified areas in which key work is needed, like the hiring of new teachers as well, the learning, the measurement of learning, and two points that you have mentioned, Governor. One is the private sector side of the equation, because it's very big here in Nigeria, and it's always a tension in many systems. You don't want to say you want to support them because they are part of a supply, and there won't be enough resources from the public sector side to say, well, we don't need the private sector, we'll just cover everything, right? At least in the short term, in the next few years, that won't happen, right? So I will see two margins of actions in which one will need to work. One, I think, is just the improvement that you are already implementing in the quality of public schools. I mean, that will draw people from the private to the public sector, and that's good, right? That's a good development, right? And that's something that we have seen a few countries in which their public sector improved. Then parents are smart, right? Why would I pay here, right, if I can get this better education in the public sector for free, right? I'll go to the public sector, right? What is important for that is to educate the parents. And I think that role of the engagement with the community that you were emphasizing is very important, because sometimes parents just see the obvious things. Well, is the building well painted? Right? If there is grass, right? The teacher's there, right? So then I go to the private school. But here you're already making some good competition to the private schools. To start with, your teachers are there, which is a big difference to some years ago, right? So that's already there. So that difference between the public and private has been reduced, right? Now, what parents need to have more information is what's happening inside the classroom. It's very difficult sometimes for parents to understand if in the classroom learning is happening or not. Right? For many parents is, well, my child is going to school, something must be happening there, right? They not necessarily know that now there's a smaller difference between the public and the private. right? And they don't necessarily know. So I think there has to be some work on that front. And on the other margin, which is complicated, is that there needs to be some sort of regulation and supervision of private schools, right? I mean, in many systems in which public and private coexist, a role for the public sector is to regulate and supervise what's happening in those private schools, right? Because at the end of the day, they are generating a certificate saying, well, you completed junior secondary or you completed a higher secondary. You must know that the quality is at least of a minimum standard, right? And in the extreme, in some cases, we have seen illegal schools, informal schools, schools that you think something is happening, actually nothing is happening, they're just selling a certificate, right? That's the extreme. I don't think that's happening here, but there's the extreme in terms of an unregulated private sector side. So that's something that to discuss, in more detail. It's not easy. To regulate sometimes is as complicated as to provide, right? But public sectors have that dual responsibility. You have to provide the service, and when there is this large private sector, you need to regulate that service, right? So that's tough. But some initial steps might be a movement on the right direction. And then one final point that I wanted to make is that this, I think, is a critical area of work for the next 24 months. The issue of communication, of socializing, and to bring parents, in particularly public opinion and the press, to this side of the table, right? They not necessarily will know what's happening in terms of what's the improvement, also what needs to continue, what are the next steps and the things that should happen in the near future. But this shift in the focus of the system towards learning, of caring about what happens inside the classroom, that's the big shift. Let's care about what's happening in that interaction inside the classroom. That's something that not necessarily the public will know. I don't know well. I don't know you'll know the internal politics. I will not know well, but that's the main assurance of the sustainability of reforms. Some things can be put in law, but even laws can be changed, right? When whoever comes later. So I think the main insurance for some changes to remain in place, and at least that has been my experience also when I've been in your shoes, right? In the shoes of the commissioner, which is the equivalent to a minister, is that the sustainability of reforms depends on the public opinion, depends on young people, interest in education, depends on the parents that are, for instance, we introduce teachers' evaluations, which is tough to introduce. And obviously teachers resist sometimes those type of evaluations. But parents like that a lot. When parents were explained, look, now teachers are gonna be hired and promoted according to their performance and their evaluation. So teachers are gonna be assessed in the same way that students are assessed, that your children are assessed. Parents love that. Say, okay, great, of course. Teachers have to be to the standard. So it has been impossible for any politician later, despite the fact that teachers is a large voting population, right? In the case of my country, for instance, 500,000 teachers, right? In a 35 million people country, you have like almost 450,000 teachers. So that's an important, right? It's an important constituency. Well, but it's that or the parents? And parents loved the evaluations. So no politician has dared to say, I'm going to eliminate that. Some said, well, maybe if I say that, I get 400,000 votes, right? That would be great. No. But parents were, the public opinion polls were saying that parents loved that, right? So 90% of the population, to the question is, do you agree that teachers must evaluate it? 90% said yes. So that I give that example just to show that, that is probably more important than what's in a law, because a law can be changed, right? So I think a lot of the work on communication is going to be very important in the coming
Joan Oviawe wey be the Commissioner for Education for Edo State and Salami Ozavize wey be the chairman of the State Universal Basic Education Board (SUPEB) for the interactive session come chook mouth for the progress wey the state dey make on top education.
Just listening to you talk about private school and regulating them.
And the number of teachers in Peru.
Yeah. I mean, I had to glance at the functioning permanent secretary of the Ministry of Education, because that's exactly what we are doing right now. We're trying to regulate our private schools, and it hasn't been easy. And so we're very, very interested in getting more information about best practices, how to more effectively regulate them. In Edo State, we have essentially 3 types of providers of private school education. We have the religious bodies, we have the more higher-end private schools, and then we have the low-fee private schools. So currently, the low-fee private schools typically are not registered. So they just set up shop anywhere and they do whatever. Right now, what we're even trying to do as a ministry is to even know how many private schools exist in Edo State. Unfortunately, I can't tell you. And so we've started an enumeration process, literally putting people out on the streets, going from street to street, identifying all of these schools. So thank you for that feedback, and we'll be reaching out for more information.
Essentially, when we started the program, there was need to send benchmarks that were measurable as the program progressed. Of course, focus was on making sure teachers were in class, children were learning, the environment was conducive for learning, take away corporal punishment, you ensure that instruction was right, school management, school level management was given focus to the end, that we improved literacy and numeracy scores across board. This is the design upon which the EdoBEST program was based and structured. EdoBEST was very well positioned in a time of COVID to leverage on the technology already in place to implement what we now know as EdoBEST at home. So we implemented EdoBEST at home in the period of COVID to minimize learning losses and to sustain the progress of the EdoBEST program to date at the time. So we come to a period of after COVID in October 2020, where the children have been at home for a 5-month period. You know, they have not been left alone. They've been engaged in EdoBEST at home, and so we're back in school. We are back from a period of having implemented teaching at the right level, EdoBEST at home. Now we're back in school in person, and we go back to a period where we take the timetable back to the scaffolding. So we put in the national curriculum because we're answerable to a federal body. We also realize as a takeaway that from the stakeholder engagement at the time, like the parents and all of that, people wanted the fuller curriculum back. But hey, we made gains, so let's see where we are. So in 2020, we did fluency assessment, and we compared our children in 2021 with their performances in 2019. What we found was that after the catch-up plan, we found that in actual fact, pupils actually improved during the time between 2019 and 2020, during and after the COVID period. We had primary 1 pupils in 2021 reading at nearly the same levels as primary 2 pupils in 2019. We saw that this same evaluation found that an average EdoBEST primary 3 pupil had foundational numeracy skills at nearly the same level as an average non-EdoBEST primary 5 pupil for the same period. We also found that an area of growth where we needed to focus on, there were still too many non-readers, both in early grades and higher grades. This led us to invest in a new literacy program within the EdoBEST. It led us to an overhaul of our literacy program and as it reflected in the lesson guides. So in 2021, we launched EdoBEST 2.0. And so we go into a place where we are consolidating on the gains made so far in primary school. We are extending the EdoBEST program to JSS in the spirit of disarticulation. We are implementing EdoBEST progressive in our rural, hard-to-reach, and riverine schools. So we realize that while a lot has been done, we know that we are at a place where we need to consolidate on the gains that we have made. we have to have serious conversation on how sustainable our program is, what improvement needs to be made, especially as we move towards domesticating more and owning our program.
Oluwatobi Odeshola, TMC TV News. Make una remember say your PVC na your power. No go sell your votes give any politician or political party on election day.